Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we explore a more feminine aspect of the extraterrestrial experience that we humans are having. As we prepare ourselves for that dialogue with the three of our extraterrestrial studies students in a moment, I want to just say to everyone that there's a lot of excitement here in Washington today. People are arriving from around the country. Some people actually are coming in internationally for the hearing that's going to take place tomorrow, late tomorrow morning, about 11:30 Eastern Standard Time in the House of Representatives. The Government Oversight Committee is convening the next hearing on UAP disclosure. There are four witnesses that have been scheduled. They released their testimonies today electronically, so you can hear what they're going to say. One of them is Lou Elizondo, whose book Imminent has been a New York Times bestseller. He used to work for the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program in the Pentagon. There's also Tim Gallaudet, a retired Rear Admiral in the Navy who's had extensive experience as the chief oceanographer of the Navy for many years and was the temporary head of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. So he has a lot of information on various UAP communications and contact. Michael Gold will be testifying. He worked for Bigelow Aerospace between 2003 and 2017. There is a lot of evidence that Bigelow Aerospace was deeply involved in reverse engineering technology, seeking to get technology actually from Lockheed Martin that has been involved since the 1940s with the US government on retrieved craft reverse engineering. And the reason why we know that is because of a recent whistleblower account to Michael Schellenberger, who's also going to be testifying, who released information through Russ Coulthart and his News Nation podcast, Reality Check, about a month ago concerning the office in the Pentagon, the program in the Pentagon called Immaculate Constellation, which is apparently the umbrella for all the UAP-related matters going back decades, at the center of which is the US and military corporate reverse engineering attempts to get the ET technology applied to even more advanced weaponry than the US arsenal already has. We are fully engaged in the UAP disclosure movement, as you all know. We have a very interesting course coming up beginning on the 20th of November on Rendlesham.
27th.
27th, thank you. 27th of November. And Rendlesham happened in December of 1981, where a alien craft actually landed near a nuclear weapons facility in England. And there are people who are still alive today who were there, touched the craft, photographed it, and then, of course, it flew away. So that's going to be a very interesting course, everyone, on what took place at Rendlesham. It's one of the most striking incidences since Roswell in July of 1947. We also want to make sure that people are watching out for our first course in January. and that is going to be on remote viewing. We at Ubiquity University will be offering a 1-year, 8-course program on extraterrestrial awareness and communication. In our view, the government disclosing what it knows is important, but ultimately secondary. The reality is that we already know the truth. We know that we're not alone. We know that extraterrestrial beings have been on planet Earth for some time. There's been contact, there's been communication. The central challenge of the human race moving forward, as certainly we gather more information from the government and from the contracting corporations, is really to begin intelligible communication and open-hearted contact with these extraterrestrial beings. That's the most important objective. And that's why, for the first time in any academic institution, anywhere in history, Ubiquity University is going to be teaching all of us how to engage in mental telepathy and remote viewing so that we can engage individually with our extraterrestrial neighbors in an intelligible way, in an open-hearted way. It's a very exciting moment. And we at Ubiquity University and the New Paradigm Institute and Humanity Rising are in the thick of it. So it's in that spirit that I want to welcome the 3 Ubiquity University students that are a part of the ET Studies program, who are developing a podcast called She Sees Stars, which is a feminine approach to this extraordinary cosmic phenomenon that all of humanity is getting ready to embark upon. So Pamela Livingston, Michelle DesPres, Laura Castellanos, welcome to Humanity Rising. And I turn the program over to you. You'll make a presentation, and as usual, I'll circle back toward the end, and then we'll dialogue for the balance of the time. And all 3 of them will be joining us for the after chat, everyone, so there'll be plenty of time to interact. Welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we'd like to introduce Humanity Rising's audience to She Sees Stars. We are, as Jim had mentioned, all PhD students in Ubiquity Universities in partnership with the New Paradigm Institute's program for extraterrestrial studies. And we are part of the first cohort. We are the guinea pigs for this programming. So far, we have focused on law, on history, on protocols. We have also looked quite deeply into investigating these crash sites and retrievals through the Roswell history. And we're going to be participating in the Rendlesham adventure. So we're all very excited about this. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Michelle DesPres, whose background includes being a medium and a extraordinary contact with a number of beings. So I'm going to leave that to her to discuss further. And then, of course, Laura Castellanos, who has fascinating background and psychic experiences as well. We are all experiencers, but in different ways. My background is possibly a little bit more classic to the, this is not a term I like, but abduction. experience. So I am going to allow my co-hosts to introduce themselves. And because of the recent interest and controversy regarding Netflix Manhattan alien abduction show, we're going to focus on that discussion because we feel that it relates very much to how women are portrayed in this conversation and in the greater world as well, but particularly in regards to the extraterrestrial or non-human intelligences communications and in the public sphere. All right. Well, Michelle, would you like to begin?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful lead in because, yeah, there's so many things happening right now, right, in the world. And there's so many topics we could touch on um, as timely topics. But I thought that the Netflix show, it's a wonderful little lead in to why we as women want to do these things, what we've noticed about the culture of women, how it's infiltrated UFOs. And so really that's exactly why I'm here, is I'm really interested in these topics like that. Like Pamela was saying, I'm a clairvoyant medium. I've been on before. Some of you were probably there. And I really like having the dialogue about it, but I've recognized the one reason I want to do this is I feel it is exceptionally important as a woman to have a voice. And so I'm always like, where do I have that voice? And this is a perfect platform for it. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion. It'll be fun. It'll be interesting. It'll be light in certain ways, but it'll certainly make you think. We'll let Laura go now.
Absolutely, Michelle. Thank you. So excuse me, I'm Laura, and we are looking at this episode on Netflix, and we were talking about it because here we have this very important case in UFOlogy, and she is being discredited on this Netflix show by the ex-wife of Bud Hopkins. And I don't know, ladies, if you guys want to just jump in and
Let's do.
So yeah, so we're just gonna. I don't know if you guys have watched the show, but we watched it a few times, and we've been thinking about it because this just dropped on Netflix, and so it's just kind of apropos for the times and what we're all kind of experiencing as a global community. That all of these new things are coming to light about UFOs or NHI and UAP, and we're looking at these old cases, and she's being discredited by the other woman. So there's this possible love triangle situation, but that's also maybe unfair because Bud was a man who helped many people, and I don't know if Pamela or Michelle, if you guys want to talk a little bit. I mean, so do you guys know a little bit about Bud? He was somebody who had been doing this for a very long time and had a lot of connections with very important, credible people in the UFO research community, such as Dr. John Mack, and what's that? What was that?
Whitley Strieber.
And Whitley Strieber in his book Communion, and so with this case that happened with Linda Napolitano, who was the woman who had one of the most incredible abduction cases.
Well, let's take a minute here a second, Laura. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm seeing it in the chat.
Sure,
Let's
sure.
give
Go
kind of
ahead.
a synopsis.
Sure.
Let's give sort of the context for what today's show is, why we want to look at it, and just a quick synopsis of the show.
Okay, so Netflix in the last couple of weeks dropped a three-part series, a 3 or 4-part series on a very famous abduction incident. It became famous because there were many witnesses to the fact, but it also was famous or became infamous because it ruined the career of a renowned ufologist. So the ufologist in question is Bud Hopkins. But I should just note that this is going to have spoiler alerts. So there are going to be spoilers in this conversation. However, I hope it will enrich your experience in watching it. So Bud Hopkins was a renowned artist. His works, he went to Oberlin College. His works are in the Whitney, Guggenheim, and New York's MoMA permanent collections. He had his own experience in 1964 with 2 friends. It was a witnessing. I did not see that it was an actual abduction or that there was time loss. But this inspired him to begin researching these interactions. He had an extraordinary ability to work with people. He is every description of his personality. He is passed over a decade ago, but everyone who worked with him, from his researchers and the people who were part of the abduction support groups, all note how compassionate he was, and that has been consistent in everything I've ever read or seen about him. He is given credit for bringing John Mack into the research of these abduction cases. And of course, the most famous case of John Mack's was the Betty and Barney Hill abduction. So under this background, Bud Hopkins marries a woman named Carol Rainey, who is, or was, because she is now passed, in the last year. Carol was a documentarian, a writer. She co-authored and helped Bud write a couple of the books, co-authored one in particular. And she is noted for her focus. She's been a grant writer in science since her marriage. Their marriage did dissolve. And so this is the umbrella of this show. And it was Carol who discredited Bud's his research methodology. And the case that received the most attention was the Linda Napolitano case. And this is because of the amount of witnesses. Okay, so hopefully that provides you with a background. And would anybody like to just talk about the abduction case itself?
Yeah, well, so to continue with that preface, the show is really set with these 2 women and their interactions with each other over I'm guessing a couple of years here, or maybe more. It went for a while.
I believe it was about 3 years.
Okay.
I've been trying to put together the timeline, and so far I've got from uh, mid 1989
89.
92, and but that's
Okay.
not definitive.
Right. Part of what we're doing on this podcast and as students, right, we're figuring out, how do you research? What does research look like? This is a really kind of a cool case for that, in the sense that, well, how much can you research from a show without going to see people? But also, how did they research, and what can we see from some of the people who were pioneering in this field? How can we improve on it? What do we need to know? Those types of things. But it was very interesting how the two women are very pitted against each other. And we're going to talk about some of that. You got to remember, this is back in the 90s, beginning of the 90s, right? Where are we in feminism at that time? What's really happening there? We also get a lot of the background of these two women. Well, I don't know if we get a lot of Carol's, the wife's background, or not. We get a cloudy one. And what I found interesting about that was what Bud Hopkins' assistant, Peter Robbins, had to say. In describing Carol, he says she was guarded. And I thought that was a pretty interesting, descriptor for her. He would have been around her often, all the time, really, because like they said, that was an open house. So anyway, this idea that they pit these women against each other, I think, is an interesting element of the show. It leads, in the long run, it kind of leads to Linda suing Netflix for this, for the airing, because she feels that she is misportrayed there. And so it continues. It's like it's a continuing drama here, but we're weeding out, where's the truth? Where's the deception? Why, should it have been debunked? So I find that very interesting, and I don't know if Laura wants to say anything about that.
And we should just note that the name of the series is The Manhattan Alien Abduction, and it is on Netflix right now.
Thank you, Pamela. So the thing that we found very interesting was we all have our different opinions on who do we believe, or the believability of the story. But this is a case that many people may be actually familiar with, because there was so many witnesses in this case. And so it was a huge case, and people refer back to it. So that's one important part of it. So the thing is that the debunking of it is all mainly being done by Carol. And in the very beginning of the very first thing we see in this show are these two women basically going back and forth, insulting each other like little schoolgirls on the playground, throwing rocks at each other. Can someone type in the name that Pamela just mentioned? So abduction in Manhattan.
Manhattan Alien Abduction. I'm typing it in as we speak. And what was so impressive was that this occurred in Manhattan in view of the Brooklyn Bridge. There were 23 purported witnesses, of which there's some question about a couple of the witnesses, but there's
maybe a handful.
But there are witnesses on camera, etc., that noted it. So
there was about two. There was two women who went on camera later, and I think there was a list of them, and there were, and there's definitely plausible reasons for why people would want to keep their themselves anonymous in a case like this. especially because of everything surrounding believing anything of this nature. You're going to be ridiculed, or it's very easy to get ridiculed for it. And that was a big deal for all of the support group that Bud created in the first place. Was all about supporting everybody who didn't feel there was a place to be supported. But the interesting thing is about this case is the way they chose to go about creating the story of what happened.
Right.
Instead of really going down and giving the facts and creating getting the data and getting the information, they basically just allowed these two women to arguing with each other to be the focal point of the storyline, and the idea that it's around ETs and UFOs is part of the theme around it. But the main idea behind what they wanted to show were these two women arguing and fighting over this man. And it seemed to me to be the way they were creating the situation.
And in that context, it misses the greater point of what's really going on here. It again slants the UFO topic in this, weird sort of like woo-woo, it's silly, it's kind of nonsense. They're sort of presenting some fact, but they're also bringing in they're making it more about the fight and this cattiness.
And
when there's actually a really good case here for what happened to her. And I think we should just go, let's go kind of piece by piece through the film and talk about some of those topics. But what did you want to say there, Pam?
Well, I wanted to know that this tactic that makes great entertainment because it enhances tension and such, has been used against the UFO community. It's been used against any kind of uprising and such, where basically the tactic is to turn people in on each other, as opposed to creating a group that doesn't have to agree on everything, however, supports the bigger picture and the cause, which is certainly what we're all studying, why we're all part of the Ubiquity University and New Paradigm Institute's programming, is to, it's partially a process of legitimizing ufology, but it's also to bring people together, such as everybody who is watching right now or will watch this in the future. So what I think is super important to know when watching this series is that it is divisive, and it's intentionally divisive. I've seen this, being old enough to have watched this with different movements, from a civil rights movement to women's movement to every movement that my decades on this planet have provided. However, to see it so obviously continued and as entertainment, and I think
makes you wonder. Yeah,
exactly.
And we have the same divisiveness in the UFO community.
Yes.
And there's got to be a way to unite and put aside those differences, or we're going to keep going down these same roads, knock them down, and never really get to the heart of what is real and what is the bigger picture going on.
Exactly. Laura, when we were speaking yesterday, you had noted the misogyny in this presentation, and also you were the one who found the lawsuit information, some of the articles that Linda Napolitano has is suing Netflix, as is there is someone also in the suit with her. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. So Linda was so Linda is now suing Netflix because she felt like the way they portrayed her was not accurate. And I could only imagine agreeing to be a part of something on Netflix and then just getting edited to the point where it's completely out of context, or I mean, and for sure, I think that there is definitely something to be said with how the editing looked like it was on more on Carol's side of it. I could say I think the design of how it was edited was to be about this cat fight between these two women, but it seemed also they wanted to let the audience pick whose side they were going to choose on who was right and who was wrong. But it also seemed more like they were letting it be Carol's research as the all-knowing information, but there was no other data or information given aside from Carol's information. And Linda, there was no real data or information backing up Linda's side of the story, and
other than 23 witnesses.
Yes.
23 witnesses, and they had a couple of them on, and then they had her. They had her chain smoking all the time, like the smoking man in the X-Files. So very caricatured on the part of Linda, and I think that maybe Carol was getting a bit of a break on that, but they would so the issues they were disagreeing on was that it boils down to the fact that Carol believes she was being basically lying the whole time to Bud, and basically creating this thing for attention, lonely housewife in her own words, and in the writing that she wrote was very much what women a thing that when women say it to each other, it's kind of some like a cat fight situation. She cared too much about her makeup. She cared about too much about the way she looked, her dress, and all this bothered Carol a lot because Carol didn't care about those things. And
well, let's talk about Carol's background. Let's start with a little bit of history on how Carol and Bud met. So Carol was supposedly a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, and she meets Bud in Las Vegas. And at this point, Bud is a ufologist in that sense, and he is interviewing people and he's out doing his research and writing his books. And Bud's taken by Carol. He invites Carol to come and live with him in New York, and he will support her, is what he says. And Carol clearly states in the documentary, I was not looking for a husband. I did not want to be married. But then there was the Bud factor. So somehow she was swayed by Bud, who I think was pretty charming. I would say it's really interesting as we're talking about misogyny. It's not from Bud. But it doesn't come from Bud. It's fed through these women, through upbringing, through just the way that we are in our culture. It wasn't Bud that necessarily, set that in motion in any way. I don't think, not from what I saw.
There's
yeah.
There's a question that's, what is the essence of this? Documentary, and what are we pointing out, of course, about it? And so ultimately, from what we have seen, is that this documentary is divisive and using the UFO and abduction experience as yet another entertainment opportunity as opposed to a true investigation. There are, just for what it's worth, the actually AJ and Hecklefish of the Y-File, shout out, that he does a great half hour on details on this. He goes through that, what the letters were, and some of the things that are discrediting to Linda, but not necessarily discrediting to what she experienced as an abductee. And so there were many witnesses. I'm noting that there's someone here who knows one of the witnesses. I did find that there were at least one witness on the Brooklyn Bridge, but there were witnesses, most of them were on the street. There is a map of where the witnesses are, etc. And Bud actually made the names anonymous in his book Witness, just to protect them. But there is a list of the witnesses that exists. I believe Bud's files are they now at Rice University in the database there?
Sort of think I've heard that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like somebody in the comments, Maureen. Hi, Maureen. So she really wants to talk more about how we can connect. So, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, we could definitely talk, get to more real life, or not our not what's on Netflix, but well, I mean, I can talk from my experience, going and connecting in contact. A huge part of that for me was meditation and the learning of getting more into the practice of connecting to meditation, and also it helped me to have a practice where I had an intention to connect in increments to higher frequency or higher energy beings that were there for the good. And
yeah, let's save that for the after chat. If you guys
Got
want to
it.
know about some of that, we'll talk about it in the after chat, but I think we stick to the Netflix. Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think we need to wrap up this portion pretty quickly. And
But thank you for the question. We'll talk about that later. And yeah, sorry about that. So thanks, Pamela.
So just to note, the point of bringing up this Netflix series, and it's easy for us to focus on because it does involve a rather classic divisive methodology, and it outlines it within the series itself.
Right.
It also involves the questioning of someone who was a pioneer in ufology, and not again, not to say that every one of his methods were necessarily appropriate for the purpose or the point, but I wasn't there. I have read and seen a lot on this, but it's important to not take the sound bite and to look a little deeper into the greater issue.
Well, let's talk about that, because the motives here is the discrediting of Bud. Where does that happen? How does that happen? Why does that happen? So Carol comes along, she's making a documentary. She's talking about the fact that, she was into her documentary stuff. She moves in with Bud, and suddenly it is UFOs all the time. And she is watching his methodology. At some point in there, she allows him to regress her. Part of his methodology is regressing people so they go back into their memories. She's watching how these people are going into their memories. It's very open. There's no secrecy. It's all transparent with Bud. Everything's open. So his methodology is open. And she's watching it and she's seeing these people go through their traumas and how emotionally attached he is to these people as they're going through their traumas. She's starting to think he's too emotionally involved, is not seeing the bigger picture. Are these people really lying? She's a skeptic. She doesn't, she hasn't had her own experience. She hasn't done that. She then has her own regression. And she comes to her own childhood in what was it? The Plymouth, some fundamental Christian group.
Plymouth
Right.
Brotherhood.
Yes. And this sort of brings her, I think it's an interesting point that she brings up, because she obviously understands how hypnosis can get you deep. But we all know hypnosis is flawed. But then this Linda Napolitano steps in, and her story, and Bud, the whole time, Bud is looking for a credible witness, or a credible story that he can really purport, because he's been going through the media outlets, through these talk shows, and being made fun of with his support group of people who have had serious encounters, but nobody's taking them seriously. So he wants to write this book, but they need something solid that has other witnesses. Then Linda comes along, and she thinks she may have had one of these experiences, and he regresses her. She gets to her experience. They start talking about it. Next thing they know, and maybe you can fill in how they got to all of their witnesses, but it turns out they've got 23 witnesses to Linda's abduction. A couple of witnesses at the very least, her floating out the window of her Manhattan apartment in the 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is. As we go along, we start to see where that method. So the whole point is that Carol starts to suspect that Linda is lying and creating the story. And she's now documenting Linda through the entire process. But really in the process, she is also questioning Bud at every turn. How do you know they're telling you the truth? How do you know they're telling you the truth? How do you know they're telling you the truth? He's even starting to question himself in there, although he can't deny the validity of their emotions. So he's torn. Somewhere in there, it gets infiltrated into the demise of his projects, the demise of the study, of the research.
And the demise of 2 marriages.
Yes.
I know, that's the thing. So it's very easy to focus on these aspects of it and not look at the big picture of what it all comes down to. And that is that there's this huge case with all these witnesses, and there's there's a person who's involved in it, Carol, because the more you learn, Carol was involved in a lot of it. So she's filming all these people. So she's involved in all of Bud's life. And it's really interesting that Bud would pick a non-believer. So she's a non-believer, and she's real proud of herself. And a big part of her identity is that she left this fundamentalist Christian cult because she had the ability to see through the BS. And she got kicked out because she put a stand and she spoke her truth, and she stood by what she believed in. And she felt like the moment she stood up to Bud and told him that she thinks that could it be possible that in his hypnosis sessions he is influencing his patients or his clients. And he snapped at her and said something, but it reminded her, it triggered her because it reminded her of her father
Not being able to have a voice.
not being able to have a voice,
And
and
questions aren't welcome.
his way was the only way, because Bud really believed in what he was doing. But see, the thing that's interesting is that she sees her life like, and now I married my father again, and now she's at war with her father. She's not even seeing Bud anymore. She's just seeing her dad. That's what I think. And so they're kind of utilizing that to fuel this scenario and to take away from, did this happen or didn't it happen?
Right, because I think you have to look at Bud is a rescuer.
Right, he is. I think we need to take this offline now.
Okay.
And I want to thank everybody for, being here as part of the discussion, and invite you to continue with the discussion. This speaks to many of the issues in the UFO community, far beyond what we've been able to tap into here. So thank you very much for including us. And I believe Jim returns and we vanish from this.
No, you don't vanish yet.
No. Okay. All right. So thank you.
Yeah, this is very interesting that you were very clearly taken up with this abduction account on Netflix. It was quite controversial. People thought it was going to be much better than it turned out to be. Because it's in the context of others, like Spielberg did a 4-episode program, I think last year. There's others. They just released one with George Knapp last week. And the new genre of programs are sort of starting from either zero doubt, which is what Carl Nell has said is the reality, or we're much more sympathetic. So I'm not sure what kind of went south with the Manhattan one.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it really did go south. I'm a little still on the fence about that, because I think that it was, it's unfortunate that they have to make it such a drama and these kinds of things. And like what you were saying, Laura, Linda as the smoking man and things like that. It's like they just have to dramatize it all. But it's a really good and I'm noticing these droppings of UFO information. It is systematic today. And so this is just, yeah.
You can't keep up anymore.
Right. You can't keep up anymore. But what I think is so interesting really about this case in the long run is I'm not so sure that Bud didn't get FBI'd or CIA'd through the process, this purposeful thing. And I think it's and I think this is part of why these documentaries are coming out like this, to make us reassess them, to look at it again and to see that, was there some infiltration? We all know that all the UFO groups,
Oh, absolutely.
they were infiltrated. Was Carol an infiltrator? I mean, we're not going to know that. I don't know how we would get to know that.
Yeah.
For you in 50 years.
Tell us about She Sees Stars.
So She Sees Stars is going to have, it'll be formatted so that we have our guys on the ground who are going to help report on the current events, and other outside reporters such as Giorgio Piacenza and Troy Peterson, who are part of our cohort. And each of us have different foci. But She Sees Stars is going to look predominantly at the women who have been a part of the UFO experience for decades who do not get the airtime that we have, standard folks on most of the media, and we all recognize them and we all know their names, and there are less than 10, and they're not women. So the idea is, or anyone else, so inclusive. So the idea is to expand inclusivity into this topic.
And is this like a weekly podcast? Is it like Humanity Rising, where it's just a Zoom broadcast on a regular basis? Are you planning a documentary? Say a little bit more about what She Sees Stars is, sort of from a technical point of view.
Yeah, well, part of the reason that that I really was wanting to do some of this was, as a research student now, wanting to do that, how do I find information? Where do I get to discuss the information? And I think this is an up and coming field. We're going to see more and more students coming into it. So giving them kind of our experience, here's what we're finding through our research, and here's what we're learning, and just a place, it's all, I kind of see it like student radio. Just a place, and it'll be a weekly show, and we'll be talking about, my focus is always going to be mostly telepathy, and so my research will really be built around telepathy, but we'll be really looking at what our research subjects are. But we're also going to stay up to date with current topics. We'll really start every episode with a current topic of the time, and we'll talk about it, and then we'll get into whatever our discussion is for the day and what we found and different things like that. But then we also want to do a segment that celebrates people in the field, probably mostly women, but we can't be so exclusive like that. Honestly, we might be about feminine, but we love everybody, even the aliens. So we're
but
really
I think
inclusive.
Actually, I think your initial impulse that She Sees Stars, to accentuate the feminine. I don't know of any other podcast or approach that's really emphasizing the feminine aspects of this. People have been so focused on the content, retrieved craft, retrieved biologics. They're looking for all this hardware, and because it's a national security frame, most of them sort of by definition are men.
Right.
But you've got Leslie Kean, New York Times, you've got Linda Moulton, you've got Bertie Jaworski, the remote viewer, you've got a number of people like Esperde Ananas at Damanhur. You should check out what the Damanhurians are doing around the ETs and the women there. It's really, really extraordinary. So I think an emphasis on the sacred feminine would make this very, very distinctive.
That's great feedback. Yeah, we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Well, that's my focus. So
yeah. However, Ubiquity University could support this and promote it. We're at your service, because this is a student initiative. Student radio. This is going to be very, very cool.
Yeah. And what's so fun is the community that's being built through the university, and being able to launch platforms like this. The time has come. So thank you.
I think so. I mean, it's indicative of the current state of play, as it were, that over the last 5 years, there's been just a burst of activity. And I've talked with a number of people who are sort of veterans for 20, 30, even 40 years, and they say they can no longer keep up with the volume of information and podcasts and whistleblower releases and everything that's going on. So this is the moment where something like what you're offering becomes part of the contribution to create this as a global phenomenon. and I wouldn't be at all surprised, be very interested, for example, in the experiencers and how many of the experiencers turn out to be women.
Yeah.
It's interesting in the conversations. I've found that it's appears to be a majority. Now, I've been actively pinning databases because I'd like to know. One of the things that I found in communicating about databases was that the way the information is organized, it's very difficult to get things like gender in these experiences. It wasn't when the information is available. We're talking about what's great is that these amazing databases exist, but what's difficult is that at this moment they haven't been organized yet to just be able to pull that kind of data out. So that's on my PhD list of things.
Let me ask you, each of you, and because I think our audience would be interested in it, because it's obviously you're approaching this with both gusto and passion. But I think all of us would be interested in your respective stories, your pathway about how you came to appreciate the ET phenomenon. You mentioned that you're all experiencers. So take, 3 or 4 minutes each and just tell us your ET pathway.
Okay.
Sure. I'll start. Yeah, as a young girl, I've always talked with just different energies, the Indian in the mountain, the Indian in the clouds, whatever little friend wanted to come and play with me. I was kind of alone. I did not have a family that communicated. And in the long run, I think that was a benefit because it didn't stop me from connecting with those energies. Until, of course, I was like a teenager and I'm walking with friends and I'm telling them my experiences and they tell me I'm weird. So I shut down at that point, and then not again until I was in my 30s. Came knocking on the door, and I hear, messages, and I'm in a life crisis basically, and I hear this message: "Fret not, everything will be okay." And I was like, "Oh my God, I don't know who you are, but you just made me feel so much better." And so it was then I really started on that journey of why do I hear these things? What is this? And now, 20 plus years down that road, I built a practice around my clairvoyant practice, which I see very much as a psychology, a therapy. I really approach it in that manner. Because I really think that it gets you to the healing that you need to, wherever your balance is. It's what gets us to that balance. But over the process of that, I have had many ETs come through. It's just one of those things. So I'm not a classic abductee in that sense. I just get them coming through. And lately, since I've started this program, I am noticing a group of maybe there's 9 of them. There could actually even be more. I think there's something of a coalition. Every now and then, one of them will step up and be a part of a session for me. And so far, the one I think I've been connecting with the most is the Andromedan. And he's very helpful. But they're starting to show up like this. But he told me I asked him, "Where are you from?" And I'm expecting him to take me into the galaxies. And he took me under the water out in the Pacific, like off of somewhere deep out in the Pacific off of Hawaii. And I saw either they live underground, under the ocean in caverns, or there's a ship down there. But that's what he was showing me. So all of this has, I think it's just the right time, right moment. Yep.
Yeah. Well, just a comment, and then we'll keep going. But that's this phenomenon of the crypto terrestrials. They're ETs, but they've been living on the planet for a seriously long time.
Yeah.
Buried into the mountains or buried underneath the oceans or lakes or something like that. And they've been cohabitating with us for long periods of time. We just are completely unaware.
Right.
And so thank you for bringing that up. Great, great. It's making me remember, Michelle, our conversations at Teo.
Ah, yeah.
Pamela, what about you?
Well, my experience was a little more classic in regards to I was 11, my brother was 8.5, and we were living very close to Moffett Field over a series of 5 days, I believe. We had separate bedrooms and a classic Eichler out in Mountain View, California, which is Silicon Valley Central. And we each would wake up in the middle of the night and then and would then go into each other's room and look out the window, where we saw the lines, all the power lines, all the outlines, things lit up in a very bright orange. And we saw a ship, and the ship came closer, and we were transported out of our rooms onto the ship. I have been regressed once, and my memories from the regression were not that much deeper than what I remember. But since that experience, I have seen many ships. I've had experiences where I was aware that there were beings, and it simply continues. It did. One of the things that I know others report is that after having these experiences, it expands your paranormal awareness and
Events.
Events. Yes, and I did have a couple of paranormal events before that, but it certainly expanded considerably afterwards.
That is so consistent with people that have these experiences, that their paraphenomenal faculties kind of radically expand.
Yes.
And also their compassion.
Oh, yes.
You know, their willingness to be tolerant, their sensitivity to the environment, very, very consistent. Starting with John Mack,
Yes.
with his classic book Abduction, and then his second book, Passport to the Cosmos. He details it, you know, chapter and verse. So your experience is it's a classic experiencer narrative.
Yes, it's textbook.
Yeah, like you're the poster girl. Cool, cool. Laura.
So when I a lot like Michelle and Pamela, when I was little, I was able to pick up the senses around me, or the subtle energies around me, and God, I mean, there was this connection. Something that I focus a lot, or I'm very interested, is the idea of fairy lore as well, or the energies of we're in the crypto terrestrials, the world of the fairy energies, as well as the extraterrestrial, or interdimensional terrestrials or wherever the many different beings and the different energies that we sense. I feel like when I was little, I sensed it all. I felt it very strongly. And so what happens when you feel it very strongly and you see and you're feeling and you can sense all of these things. I was sensing that I was being watched, and I could sense that. But I mean, also that's textbook schizophrenia. So what happens when you are that way, when you're a little girl and terrified of Grace and seeing and then trying to communicate with me and feeling the energies and being supported and then being outcast because of these things as you get older by my family and things like that. But the story that really changed me, or the thing that really changed me, or the experience I had was when I was little, and I honestly, I was like a child who had feelings of, I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to live in this world with all the injustice, all the pain, all the suffering. I was very sensitive to animals. I was already very sensitive, and I didn't feel like I belonged here. And when I one day I was out, we lived out in nature with the trees, and I was very connected to all of that. And I asked the universe, I asked God, if there was nothing more to this than what we have here, I wanted to die. I didn't want to live anymore. And I asked if there is nothing else, if just show me a sign. I needed proof. And there's always this thing about this proof that we need. And there was a blue jay, and he perched himself on the tree in front of the window where I was looking out. And then there, what flew next to him was a horned owl that perched itself next to the blue jay, and then stared at me. And so these two birds are staring at me, and then a third bird came, and it was a barn owl, and it stared at me. So these three birds came, and two owls, one blue jay, they're staring at me. And I'm looking at them, and they're looking at me, and I've been answered, but it was in a way that I would have never thought I would have been answered. And throughout my life, whether it was through prayer or meditation, I started doing transcendental meditation when I was very young, and to continue on this. And so I always wanted to understand it. What was this? And then I learned about shamanism, and there was a lot of sense in the magic and of nature and how everything is connecting. But and I did see a UFO land in the clearing close to my house, and I thought it was a comet. And so there are always these things around. There's always these mysteries, and so I was always digging for answers. And so that's just that's my story where I come from on this path. But when you're a natural believer and when you've seen things when you're a child, it's very different than when you're an adult trying to go into that world, like Jim, you say, the world of play, because it is a world of play. But I mean, you can very easily be called a schizophrenic or be gaslight to sound like you're a nut job or you're crazy, which is why it's so important to have facts and data and try to give people as much factual evidence as possible. But at the same time, have fun with it. So if we want to talk about fun things like maybe we have Arcturian brothers and sisters and Pleiadian brothers and sisters, and we want to get fun with it. It's okay, because even if we don't have proof, it's okay to have some fun with it, because some people believe they do have the proof, right? So I guess it's all part of the conversation.
Well, and if everyone were conscious, they'd know. It's kind of like, some of these things you just can't know unless you really have delved into your own sense of self. and you do that inner work. This is part of the reason that I really believe in this ET studies program as like the program, because all of the wisdom studies are wonderful, but I think it's the ET program that actually offers an opportunity for change. It's the one subject that could really change everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
By the way, Laura, just to circle back, you're the artist for the backdrops, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, we were talking, and so Pamela, maybe down the line we'll go into her story a little bit, but she's got some really interesting details of her story that influenced and inspired some of the where I got. So I was thinking like Liechtenstein, old pop art type of where this all kind of
Yeah.
so a
A little
throwback.
like Andy Warhol.
Yeah. Yeah, where it all started, kind of like the whole old school retro of the
Yeah.
beginning of the Roswell time.
What's you seem particularly oriented toward the blue beings.
I know. I mean, I do love the blue beings. Who doesn't? Who doesn't? No, that's just I don't know. I do I communicate with them too. So I definitely communicate with I feel like I connect with some blue beings. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
Fantastic. Well, this has been fascinating, just absolutely fascinating. I'm just thrilled that this is coming out of our ET studies program, because I think you're right, Michelle, that this program is profoundly catalytic, because the people coming out of the program are entering into a domain that has never been consciously available, at least in Western civilization. It's been available to the indigenous peoples and to people in Asia for a long time, but I would say more informally. It was just part of the way things were. But where we are right now in 2024, there's a qualitatively different aspect that is bursting into history that is requiring of us humans a more formal, I would say, conscious awareness and approach to the phenomenon. And the fact that the three of you are part of the first cohort is really a historic occasion. And I'm not surprised you're the first ones to do a feminine orientation to the ET. So you're really pioneering and making original contributions. So I really want to salute the three of you for an extraordinary endeavor and accomplishment. And it's only just begun.
Right. It's only just, well, we haven't even quite even begun, but we're getting there. We're definitely getting there. Yeah.
Well, listen, keep us informed.
Mm-hmm.
And, down the trail, we'll have you back for a interim report. And we'll keep everybody posted. Maybe we could feature you in our newsletter when it's getting set to really launch. We'll do something in the Ubiquity University newsletter and blast it out on social media, because we want to build numbers, right?
Right.
That's the whole point, is to build numbers. So when you're ready, let me know, and we'll do a big social media promotion.
Should be the beginning of 2025.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. That's an auspicious time to start.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Mhm.
Well, good. Well, thank you. This will bring us to a close for today. You're welcome to join Laura and Michelle and Pamela in the after chat. You receive the reminder, the link in your Zoom reminder for today. You can also see it in the chat box. And then tomorrow, I won't be with you tomorrow, but Tom Eddington is going to stand in for me, because I hopefully will be in the hearing room with Danny Sheehan and a number of people who've come into Washington for the hearing. And then a group of us are going to be on Humanity Rising on Thursday for a report for what happened during the hearing itself. So that'll be the next couple of days on Humanity Rising. But thank you, everyone. Thank you both. Thank you to all three of you. And
Thanks for having us.
bye for now.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.